Hello, welcome back to another exciting episode of Mr. Johnson's Math Class. For today's episode of 2 minus 3 equals negative fun, we will be adding and subtracting rational expressions. All right, for this one we are asked to find the sum or difference, and now we encounter a problem with unlike denominators. All right, so the game changes on us just a little bit here because now our denominators aren't the same. All right, and before we do this, let's just look at a real quick example. Let's just say that we had 2/3 plus 1/5. So the way that you do that is you find the common denominator, or you find the least common denominator. And the least common denominator for this would be 15. Right? So you would multiply this times 5. You'd multiply over here by 3, and whatever you do in the numerator, you do in the denominator, so on and so forth. So you end up doing 10/15 plus 3/15, and that gets you 13/15. So we'd have to do that same process of finding a common denominator, and that was just a little refresher for you. So using this problem that we have here, 5 over 6x plus 3 over 2x squared, we have to find the least common denominator between 6x and 2x squared. All right, well, the first thing I do is I consider what's the common denominator between 6 and 2. So if we only had to deal with the 6 and 2, our common denominator is going to be 6. So on our first expression here, where we have 5 over 6x, I don't need to multiply 6 by anything. And we're adding to this 3 times 2x squared. All right, well, I have to multiply 2 times 3 to get to 6. So already I'm multiplying by 3 over here. So I'm just going to go ahead and write that. So again, at first I just considered just the numbers. Now I'm going to take the variable term, and we have a variable of x, and then we've got x squared. So the common denominator between x and x squared is x squared. So our least common denominator between the two terms that we're dealing with here is 6x squared, because that's what they would both have in common if we were to get common denominators. So I've got to multiply over here times x. And since I already have x squared in this term, I don't have to multiply by anything. But on the left side, whatever I do in the denominator, right, which is times x, you got to do the same thing in the numerator. So now I end up with 5x over 6x squared plus 9 over 6x squared. All right, and now that the denominators are the same, this is just like our first few examples we worked. So we get 5x plus 9 all over 6x squared. All right, well, there's nothing we can do in the numerator because those are unlike terms, and we can't simplify any further, so this would be our final answer. So the first thing you do is find the least common denominator between your terms, and then the second thing that you're going to do is create your common denominators, and then you begin adding or subtracting. All right, here we are. 3 over 7x to the fourth plus 2 over 3x squared. All right, so I've got to find the least common denominator between 7x to the fourth and 3x squared. Well, if I consider just the numbers first, well, the least common denominator between just the numbers would be 21. All right, so setting up my problem, I've got 3 over 7x to the fourth And I give myself a little bit of room so I can do some work in between here. And 3x squared. All right, well, in the first term, I'm going to multiply this one by 3. Over here, I'm multiplying by 7. All right, and now I'm going to consider only our variable terms. All right, well, the common denominator between x to the 4th and x squared would be x to the 4th. So I've got to get a common denominator of 21x to the 4th. All right, now over here on the first term, you would multiply, now on my first term over here, I've already got an x to the 4th, so I don't have to multiply by anything. In the second term, I've got to get 2x to the 4th, not the number 2x to the 4th. I've got to get x to the 4th. So I'm going to multiply x squared, because x squared times x squared is x to the 4th. Well, that's why. All right, so 3 times 3 is 9. 7x to the 4th times 3 gets us 21x to the 4th. 2 times 7x squared is 14x squared. 3x squared times 7x squared. And now that I have common denominators, I'm just going to add 9 plus 14x squared. I'm going to go ahead and write the variable term in front. If you didn't write it like that, it's really not that big a deal. I just do it out of habit. And then 21x to the 4th. Now you might be tempted to try and simplify this 14 with 21 and 9 with 21 because of a 3 and the 21 and the 9 and a 7 in the 14, 21. However, you can't, because this numerator is a polynomial term split with a plus sign. Since there's nothing we can do, we stop here. And that's your final answer. All right, well, here we are. We find ourselves with this example of 3 over x minus 1 minus 2 over x minus 2. And our first thing we got to do is find the least common denominator. Well, there are no common factors. And since there are no common factors, we're simply going to multiply these two together. So it's going to be really pretty easy if you think about it. All right, so our first term is 3 over x minus 1. And then over here, we have minus 2 over x plus 2. All right, so to get a common denominator, I've got to multiply this side by the denominator of the other one. So this gets multiplied by x plus 2. And then right over here, we're multiplying by x minus 1. So now my next step, give myself a little bit of room to work here. We get 3 times x plus 2 minus 2 times x minus 1 all over x minus 1 times x plus 2. And now I'm going to distribute in the numerator to get rid of these parentheses, and we end up with 3x plus 6. I'm afraid I'm going to run out of some room here. And now this is negative 2. Don't forget to take that negative with it. Times negative 1. So we get negative 2x plus 2 all over. And I'm not going to FOIL in the denominator because we want this written in factored form anyway. So it just doesn't make sense to FOIL down here, which should give you a little bit of a sigh of relief, actually, because that means we're saving ourselves some work. In the numerator, we're going to simplify, combining our like terms. So we have 3x minus 2x is just x. And then we have plus 6 plus 2. So we get x plus 8 all over x minus 1 times x plus 2. So we get x minus 1 times x plus 2. And there's nothing that can simplify, nothing that can cancel out. So guess what? You guessed it. It's our final answer. All right, here we go, my friends. X over 3x minus 1 minus 4 over x minus 2. Yet again, we don't have like denominators. However, this one's not too bad because we're just going to take this denominator and this denominator. We're going to multiply them together and start working from there. All right, so on this left side, I get x over 3x minus 1. And I'm multiplying this times our friendly denominator on this other side here. Whatever I do in the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and do in the top. And we are subtracting 4 over x minus 2. All right, guys, what we have over here for this denominator, we got to multiply here. So this is 3x minus 1. And then up here, we've got a 3x minus 1. I'm going to take care of this distribution here in this next step as I rewrite everything. All right, so we get x squared minus 2x. Now this negative sign is with this 4. So we get negative 12x and then negative 4 times negative 1 is positive 4. All right, now let me restate what I just did here so as not to confuse you. I didn't write two negatives. I just took this minus sign that you see here and illustrated it here just so you could see that I was distributing a negative. I just don't want you to be befuddled by that. I am not going to FOIL in the denominator. And you may ask yourself right now, well, gosh, why not? Foiling is so much fun. Why wouldn't you FOIL? Well, foiling is fun, and I don't want to deny you that opportunity. However, we want this in factored form, right? So I'm just going to go ahead and leave it down here because it's easier. You know what I'm saying? Now, in this numerator, we can't leave without combining our like terms. So I have x squared negative 2x minus 12x plus 4 all over 3x minus 1 x minus 2. Now you might be tempted to try to factor up here in the numerator, but guess what? You can't. It's not factorable. There's no factors of 4 that add to make 14. Oh, goodness me. All right, well, that's gonna wrap it up for this one. That'll do it. We know you have a choice where you learn your math. Today you chose us. Thanks again for choosing us, and we hope you choose us again in the near future. For this episode of 2 minus 3 equals negative fun, I'm signing off. See you again real soon.